Elbow to the face, kick to the ribs, fist to the nose, wait for blood, God heal the kneecap, then to the groin, tilt up to the chin, kwaha kwabam. The hapless global justice agent who had encountered Faye Morgan in the locker room, a few from the air, and slammed onto a bank of lockers. Faye strode up from the prone form, flexing her fingers. Damn, need to pull that punch next time. I just wanted to get your attention, she said. Kneeling down and rifling through the ancient's pockets, she pulled out a ring of keys, with a coded key card on the ring. Ooh, an Aristo officer. Very nice. Thank you. Alice, now he's here. Faye stood up and looked at the prone agent over. Looks like wearing the same size. Now where's your locker, Alice? Faye scanned the lockers, located on the right one, and casually punched a hole through the door, followed by ripping the hinges off and tossing it aside. There was a gym bag in the locker with a pair of black gloves, ankle boots that were under the bag. Faye unzipped it and pulled out a pair of jeans and a black t-shirt, and as she did so, a cheap MP3 player was built into the USB jack clattered onto the floor. Faye picked it up and turned it on. She scrolled through the titles on the miniature display. She grinned. Oh, this will scare the shit out of them. Thanks, Alice. Elsewhere in the building, the possibles, the stoppables, and Wei were pondering their situation. To be fair, Global Justice had placed them in a basically self-contained three-bedroom apartment. The sleeping arrangements were cramped but livable. It would be kind of pleasant if the door wasn't always locked. If Ron didn't keep on trying to break down. Son, give it a rest, his father said. The door isn't going to budge. Ron slammed his fist onto the door. I channeled the ultimate monkey power when Kim is about to be killed by aliens now. I can't even get a flicker when she might be getting tortured to death. What the hell good am I? Ronnie, watch your language, his mom replied automatically, putting her hands over Hannah's ears. The toddler burped loudly, happily, thinking it was a new game. Ron then stalked over to the couch and sat down heavily in frustration while wearing the despair on his face. Where's Wade? In the bedroom with James and the boys. Anne said, coming from the kitchen. She then handed Ron a soda. Still no luck on decoding the lock? Thanks, Dr. P, Ron said, opening the soda and taking a swig. He then looked up at Anne, his anger having been replaced with sadness. Do you think we'll get her back? I mean, for good? Anne sighed and sat on the arm of the couch. Assuming we manage to get out of this? I don't know, Ron. The idea Wade and I had is extremely risky. What do you mean? It's complex, but basically. No, let's try this instead. Have you seen the movie Identity? Mom doesn't even let R-rated movies in the house, and Kim, she doesn't really like them, Anne finished, smiling. I know, in fact, any event, I'm afraid I have to spoil the movie in order for you to understand. In Identity, 10 people end up in a motel like in the middle of nowhere, thanks to the blinding rainstorm. But as they bunk down, someone starts killing them off one by one. Like Agatha Christie book? Ron asked. Similar, but here's a twist. It turns out that these 10 people aren't actually real, and neither is the motel or the storm. Say what? Anne smiled again before continuing. 10 people are actually multiple personalities of a prison inmate who is to be executed for murder. He's the subject of an experimental physiatric procedure, to which it pulls all the personalities in conflict with each other, until one is left. Yeah, but that movie, Ron said. I bet you can't use something like that in real life. And you'd be right, if it weren't Kim and Faye were talking about it, since we all know Faye has her own mind within Kim's head. It means that if we can induce the right kind of hypnotic state, we could conceivably force Kim and Faye to confront each other. Confront, you mean fight? Essentially. Ron's face frowned to death. Anne's face fell and looked at the floor. Yes. Ron grabbed Anne's shoulders. And you say you were going to put Kim up against Faye with no backup? No offense, Dr. P, but are you nuts? Anne then frowned at Ron in such a way that Ron quickly took his hands away. No, this isn't the ideal situation, Ron, but we know Faye still likes existing, and she isn't going to give up without a fight. The only ace we have yet is Kim is still there, and we all know that she never gives up. Ever. Anne then sighed and leaned against the back of the sofa. Of course, the hard part is trying to get Faye to stay still long enough to induce that hypnotic state. Ron then looked at the floor, processing all of this. He then looked up at Anne. Resolute? Don't worry, Dr. P. I'll make sure she stays put. He got up from the couch and barged into the bedroom. Wade, show me what you have so far. We're getting out of this dump. Squad B reporting, the squad leader said to his communicator. Behind him, 6 members of his squad nervously scanned the corridors surrounding them. We are moving into Southwest Sub 3. No sign of target. Eyes open, Squad B, Will Do replied. Agent Newsome is found in the locker room down here. Odds are that she hasn't gone far. Copy that, Control. The squad leader lets go of the button of the mic, keeping the channel open so Control could monitor the situation. She then nodded at the other Global Justice and the squad, who had been removed the stun rifles as they had been issued. As they went back down to the corridor, each agent checked that the others had been branched off of it, calling out clear when they saw nothing. As soon as they moved to the next sector, the squad leader got back into the radio. Squad B reporting. Moving into Southwest Sub 4. No sign of... Then there was a sudden burst of feedback back over the radio and the PA speakers in the ceiling. It was quickly replaced with what sounded like a pink song in progress. Suddenly there was a flash of scarlet, and the Global Justice Squad found themselves confronted with a whirling devilish energy as Faye dropped from a ceiling vent and into the midst. Stun rifles were dropped as she ruthlessly began dislocating limbs, breaking teeth, singing along with the music as she did so. Oh, lordy, lordy, lordy. I can't help it. I like to party. It's genetic and electrifying. Faye then grabbed up the rifles and the dumbfounded agent and turned it around with the squad. Mobilizing them, she then tossed him aside and threw the elbow directly into the face of the agent. Sneaking up behind her, blacking his eye, she followed up with the roundhouse kick that broke his jaw in 3 places, sent him to the floor. Wind me up and watch me go. Where she stoops, nobody knows. It's a good excuse to be a bad influence on you. Faye finished the verse by kicking the knee on one of the remaining ancients in the groin, grabbed his nose between her first 2 fingers and twisted them sharply. Breaking his nose, the ancient crumpled up on the floor, trying to slouch and staunch the massive flow of blood gushing from his nostrils. Before Faye had even the chance to admire her handiwork, one female ancient squad threw an arm around her neck, attempting to get the violent psychopath in a headlock. Faye grinned and then sunk her teeth into the ancient's forearm, drawing blood. The ancient then relaxed her grip out of reflex, giving Faye the chance to smash one of the ancient's kneecaps with her left foot. The ancient collapsed on the floor. Faye stood up grinned, and slowly, deliberately licked the blood from her teeth. Yummy, she said controversially. Although if I were you, I would get an OB-GYN damn pretty quick. Another ancient charged at Faye, only to be grabbed by the throat and usually tossed far into the wall. He slumped onto the floor unconscious. Faye then rolled her eyes and turned back to the female agent. As I was saying, she continued, it tastes like you were about 3 weeks along. You might want to get some sort of maternity program Global Justice offers. She then turned back only to see the ancient still standing. The squad leader who had pulled out his sidearm was holding it. The gun didn't shake, but Faye didn't realize the tension of the squad leader's shoulder. Oh, put it away, will you? She said, grabbing the gun and easily disarming him. God, you guys suck. I never understand why Kimmy ever considered hooking up with you once she got out of college. Oh well. Her fist then flashed out and made contact with the squad leader's jaw, knocking him out instantly. As he hit the floor, Faye had noticed the Palm Pilot-like device on his belt. She then reached down and picked it up, numbing the screen. From in the screen, it lit up, and asking for a thumb scan, Faye grabbed the leader's thumb and pressed it onto the scan. The screen then switched to a miniature desktop. Faye then fumbled through a few screens until she found a prisoner poster. She then smiled and made sure the device wasn't going to kick her out, pocketed it, singing again as she walked away. I'm off to see the doctor. I hope she has a cure. She wants to make me feel better. What does that mean? We don't know. Will Do then strode down the holding cell corridor, 2 Global Justice Agents flanking on him. He was speaking into a Bluetooth headset logged into his ear. ICAD 1 is clear. Good. Judging from what we heard from Squad B's radios, Morgan's heading for Dr. Director. I'm heading there now to move her to a new location. Keep the squads moving, and for God's sake, tell them to be more careful than Squad B was. Due out. He then stopped right in front of the cell and swiped his ID card by the reader by the door. The red light above the door turned green as the door hissed open. Inside, Dr. Director was lying on her bunk, her good arm behind the head. Dr. Director, we need to move you, Due said respectively. Bit off more than you could chew, huh? Director said. Not moving. Where is ICAD 1? He's already relocated. Figures. I never liked that fat rat bastard. Did you know that? I think we all knew that, Dr. Director, Due answered. Director then sat up, taking care of the bump casted on her arm. Morgan's loose, isn't she? Director then gave a little evil grin. Morgan's loose and she's ripping through the ranks. She hasn't killed everyone. Not yet, Director responded. If Morgan's loose, that means either our torture plans backfire spectacularly or she's finally overpowered Kimberly. In the first case, you have a slim chance Kimberly could not return. In the other, Morgan can now operate without any sort of restriction. In either case, Agent Due, well, be brutally honest with you about it, you're screwed. Due's face deepened. I can understand you aren't happy with me, but Morgan is headed here, and she's not after me. She's after you. And such, we need to make sure you're safe. Oh, she doesn't have to worry about me, came a new voice. Due then whirled around, and Director got to her feet. Faye Morgan stood in the doorway, leaning up with one hand on the doorframe. Behind her, 2 Global Justice guards were lying tangled on the floor. She smiled brightly, violet eyes glittering in the light. You, on the other hand, Willie, are in big trouble, she finished. Due quickly pressed a button to his Global Justice stopwatch. The taser then flew out and watched towards Faye. There was a flash of movement, and amazingly, Faye was holding the cable past the suction cup. Bad move, Willie. Faye then yanked the cord out roughly. Will not prepared for the disappropriate strength. As pulled off to his feet, he approached Faye. She whirled her finger around when she caught him, with a roundhouse to the face. No sooner had Due hit the floor than Director darted towards with a strike from her forearm. Faye quickly blocked, causing Director to encounter with the kick to Faye's ribs. Faye grunted from the impact but smiled. Sneaky. I like that, she responded. With a fury of punches that Director experimentally dodged and blocked with her good arm, Faye grinned again. No wonder Kimmy looked up to you. Even with one arm, she could still kick somebody's ass. I'm sure if it weren't you, I'd still be flattered, Director responded with another punch. You're no slouch yourself. Faye grinned as she blocked it. Too bad I have to end it. Her other arm flashed out, grabbed Director's cast and twisted it, breaking the cast and the arm inside it. Director screamed in agony as she fell to the floor, nursing her arm. Faye then looked down at her. Oh, sorry about that, but look at the bright side. Kimmy asked me to rescue you. It's easier if you aren't trying to take me down at the same time. Faye, I'll do it, Due said, as he threw an arm around Faye's neck. Faye then snarled and twisted. Due wasn't sure how it happened, but somehow Faye managed to break his grip, shattered one kneecap, and got him to the exact headlock, with the exception that Faye was increasing the pressure, cutting off his oxygen. You sell out your boss, you torture one of our best allies, and you try to sneak up on me? You do have to be one of the dumbest human beings I've ever met. Admittedly, that's not saying much, since it's only been 3 months. Due then struggled to escape, causing Faye to tighten up her grip. His face turned red as his air was cut off. Faye chided. You know, Willie, I can understand why you sold everyone out. I don't like that, but I can understand it. You're a guy with untenable position. Loyal to the job and the ideals, right? Due then struggled some more, and Faye loosened her grip enough just to have him gasp for air, tightening her grip again. Due tried to pry her arm away from his neck, but Faye's arm proved immobile. Pay attention, will you? Faye said, annoyed. But then you choose you're loyal to the rules, the procedure. I am pretty sure I've asked why you did it. You'd say I was only following orders, am I right? Due then groaned in response. I thought so. And honestly, I don't really get a lot of pleasure of killing guys who are just doing their jobs. Faye then glanced over at Dr. Director, who looked back, frowned, and then shook her head. Faye's grin sat standing as he looked down at Du. The Global Justice Agent's eyes wide as he made in contact with last struggle, just before Faye twisted his head and snapped his neck. She dropped Du's lifeless body onto the floor and looked at Dr. Director. "But I get enough," she said. Her expression hardened as she stormed to the cell, jerked Director to her feet, and shoved her forward. "Let's go, Betty. You don't do anything heroic or promise or no promise, you're going to be put in the category of regretful casualties." Faye just put pressure on the damaged arm and propelled Director out of the holding area. "So," Ron said, "is this going to work?" "Please," Jim replied. "It's us," Tim finished. "Boys, I've told you before, well, anything's possible for a possible. It's not polite to brag." James then chimed in behind Ron and grinned. "At least not after till you've proven right." "Wade," Ron asked, "is this going to work?" Wade and the Tweebs had pried the security pad off the door that had been wired to a strange device composed of the tinfoil lamp cord, electronics stolen from the television, and pieces of the silverware and the keypad itself. Imprisoned families had gathered around to witness the preteen genius of action. It should," Wade answered. "It'd be a lot faster if we had the communicator, but this should do in a pitch." The keypad then wired in such a way that once Jim then makes the final connection, it'll run away as many number combinations as it can through the system. Once we have a match, the door should open. Simple. "I hope so," Mr. Stoppable said. "But that's going to be one hell of a numbers. It could take days." "Language," Miss Stoppable said, covering Hannah's ears again. Anyways, Wade said, dragging back to the topic to the device. "If it all goes well, we should be able to be out of here in a matter of minutes. Ready, Jim?" Jim then gave the thumbs up. "Ready. Hit it." Jim then connected up the final wire. No sooner than he had done, the lights on the doorframe switched from red to green, and the latch clicked audibly. The group then looked at the door in surprise. "Well, that's fast," Ron said. Wade frowned. "It shouldn't have been," he replied. Hyde. The door flew open, revealing Faye and Dr. Director. "It wasn't," Faye said, simply before striding into the room. The parents in room had been protectively grabbed by their children. Ron then shook his dad's hands off his shoulder. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. Faye frowned. "Didn't I warn you about taking that tone with me?" she said. "And I'm answered to your question. I'm saving your collective asses." Miss Stoppable began, but snapped her mouth shut when Faye then turned her gaze on her. Faye then turned her attention back to Ron. "So, let's get everyone round up out of this hellhole, huh?" "We're not going anywhere with you," Anne said firmly. "We'll go with Kim." "Not possible in any sense of the word," Faye answered. "Don't argue with me." "Don't," said she's not lying. "What do you mean? What happened to Kim?" James demanded. Faye then frowned and walked over towards the possibles, ping-ponging her gaze between them, her voice rising with each sentence. "Let me make this simple for you. Your daughter is dead, Dr. Possible. She turned control over me. Dr. Possible, she will not be coming back. Dr. Possible, I'm your only chance of getting out of here alive. Dr. Possible, is that clear?" And then smacked Faye across her hard enough to turn red. Faye then paused and looked up and held up one finger. "You're upset at the news? It's shock, so I'll let it slide." She then turned her head back to face Anne. "But touch me again, and you're one of the precious tweebs are going to pay the price." "Don't threaten me," Anne said, holding Faye's gaze. "You may have nothing like her, but that's still my daughter's body you're running around in." "Do I make threats? Do I, Betty?" Faye then called out the shoulders. Directors looked up from where she had been slumped against the floor, holding her broken arm. "She killed Will Do," she stated quietly. As the news sunk in, the siren started sounding, with red lights flashing. "Well," Faye said, "it looks like we'll have to do this table discussion later. Move it." The group then quickly fled out of the room, Director leading, Ron bringing up to the rear, and with Anne pausing just long enough to give Faye another dirty look, to which it was ignored. Ron then paused at the door. "We're not done, lady." We wouldn't have it any other way, Faye replied. She shoved Ron out of the door, and they followed the rest of the group down the hallway. With Will out of the picture, ICAT and one of the commando, the Global Justice Forces were in disarray, making the rest of the escape surprisingly smooth. After consulting with the Dr. Director, Faye had led the group onto the building where there was waiting a helicopter. I'm not going to be able to fly it with this arm, Dr. Director said as they reached the roof access. Not a problem, Faye said. Daddy can fly it. He took lessons last summer. Can't you, Jimmy? Don't call me Jimmy, young lady, James replied. He then turned to Dr. Director. But she's right, I mean, it was a smaller helicopter, but the principles should be the same, right? I'll coach you, Dr. Director sighed. Glad that's settled. Faye then opened the door to the roof, and a huge gust of wind almost blew it closed. She forced it open, and motioned for the group through. Ron and Dr. Director were the last, though, as Ron helped former Global Justice Commander, and felt the light weight head pressed onto his hand. He glanced down, and his eyes widened as he saw the knocked-out Director had passed on to him. I grabbed it when she wasn't looking. Take her out as soon as you can, Dr. Director replied. Ron then nodded in reply and then put the dart in his pocket. The wind picked up out of the roof proper, and in the distance, a dark, menacing clouds were visible in the night sky, illuminated by flashes of lightning. Better get loaded quick, kids, Faye said. That storm's gonna be paying hell if it gets before we take off. The desire for freedom was overriding the desire to get out from Faye. The possibles and the stoppables began loading the helicopter. Wade then followed them, and Ron stopped in front of Faye before they boarded. What's next? He asked. Faye said, looking at the roof access for any Global Justice agents that happened to get antsy. What do you mean next? After we get out of here, what happens next? Faye shrugged. You go home, I go away, and if we're both lucky, we'll never see each other again. I see, Ron said quietly. His arm flashed out, bringing out the dart towards Faye's neck, and before he knew it, he was flying through the air and slid along with the graveled roof. He rolled into a stop and started to get up. There was an explosion of pain in his ribs as he fell back to the roof. There was pressure being placed on his hands, forcing him to drop the dart. He took up to see Faye standing menacingly over him. You just couldn't leave me alone, couldn't you? She said, anger creasing her features. I was hoping to avoid this, but you had just pushed. You aren't winning, lady, Ron growled. I want her back. Well, you can't have her, Faye said, putting more weight on Ron's hand. Ron grimaced in pain. She gave up, Ronnie. She lost. I won. Faye then began stomping on Ron's hand with each words. And she's not coming back. On back, Faye had reared back and kicked Ron across the face, sending him rolling across the roof. Faye snorted and turned back to the group, cowered around the helicopter. If your asses aren't going to be airborne in the next 2 minutes, I'm going to finish the job. Global Justice has planned for you. Understand? Oh, you betcha, came a quiet voice from behind Faye. She then looked over her shoulder and was blinded by a flash of blue light. Faye found herself flying through the air, but she managed to right herself and landed in the crouching position on the roof. Sliding on the soles of her feet, she then came to a stop and looked up. It was Ron standing on the opposite side of the roof, surrounded by a glowing blue nimbus of energy, and that was in the vague shape of a monkey. He then glared at her with a stern expression. You're done, Faye. No more. I'm going to get Kim back, he said quietly. Faye's face twisted into a sadistic grin. Over my dead body. Ron struggled. If that's how it's going to be. I was hoping you'd say something like that. Lightning flashed and then thunder followed by a few seconds afterwards. The storm had arrived.